We're going to move swiftly on to the second session. So we are slightly behind on time, but we will hopefully catch up a little bit of it, because I know the coffee break will be very important for everyone after as well. But we have three very, very interesting keynotes in this session. So each speaker is going to speak for, I hope, up to 20 minutes. And depending on time, then we'll have a moment for a question for each. And there will be no panel discussion. So we're just going to have each keynote come up, present, and then they will leave the stage. So the first keynote will be given by Aldo. And if Aldo is in the room, and he is indeed, let's give Aldo from the FDA a very warm round of applause. The clicker device is on the podium, and you can also use these microphones if you will.
Good morning. I want to thank the organizers and Liz for inviting me here. I was told, however, that the time you speak is proportional to the travel time. So I have about 65 slides. I'm with the FDA. I'm with the Office of Science and Engineering Labs. Let's see if this works. OSEL, which is the research arm of CDRH. And sorry for the long title. I'm going to use this time to talk about basically three things. I'm going to talk about a little bit of an introductory material so that you know what we're doing and our priorities in terms of regulatory science around digital twins, in silico, and synthetics. I will talk about synthetic data a little bit more. I'll highlight one of the programs, funding programs in the US with respect to digital twins, and I'll summarize. Before I start, of course, you know that innovation in medical science, in biomedicine, is very laborious, particularly burdensome in terms of the regulatory frameworks that are associated with those products. We in the office believe that the in silico methods and the digital twin evolution of those will be increasing the speed of innovation. And so we are very much supportive of these methods. I'll start by showing a picture of my boss, Dr. Ed Margerison, who some of the room have met and know, to highlight one of his great achievements in the office, which is the introduction of regulatory science tools. Regulatory science tools are methods that come in a variety of flavors that are used by the innovators in the community, people like yourself, to evaluate your inventions. We believe that innovators are very good at innovating, might not be as good in the sense of evaluating the technology. And so we want to make these tools readily available so that you spend time doing what you do best. Of course, there's, as you know, there's a spectrum of regulatory guidance documents or regulatory advice related documents. Obviously, standards are the ones that are most have broad acceptance by the regulators and by industry, which is great. However, standards take 5 to 10 years, and I'm being optimistic in some cases. So that's a lot of time. So what the goal of the regulatory science tool is to develop methodologies that they may not have the broad acceptance of a standard, especially internationally, but they are useful. And so with a time frame of about 12 to 18 months, we can put things out as regulatory science tools being used. They're not perfect, nothing is really. And so this is kind of a shift in the emphasis of the office that I wanted to communicate with you. Here's a snapshot of the regulatory science tools catalog. This is FDA's RST catalog. If you punch that into a search engine, you will get it. I don't know if you can read, maybe not. There's a variety of types of tools. There are lab methods, computational models, phantoms, test objects, and other types. I'll talk a little bit about these. I'm sorry I don't have time to go through. I wanted to tell you about all of these, which are pretty close to the last 9 tools that we've released that are related to this space. There are tools related to pipelines to generate synthetic data in different areas, tools to pre-process data and to harmonize data collection in whole slide imaging, bias tools, as well as medical extended reality evaluation tools and statistical analysis tools. I encourage all of you to go to the site, and all of this is open source and available immediately. So let me switch to synthetic data. Why do we need it? And I'm going to make the case. I think probably many of you will agree, but I'll do it anyways. This is the latest version of a graph that has been shown many times in different formats, showing the number of AI-enabled devices that have been cleared or approved by CDRH over the years. As you can see, there's been an increase, noticeable, in the last few years. I think the first, this is probably trivia, but the first device that used a deep learning network was approved by the FDA in 1998. It was a pap smear screening rule-out device. Obviously, now we're clearing or approving over 200 per year. So, and there's no sense that this is going to plateau anytime soon. Most of this is in radiology, in green, but clearly we expect all of the other product areas to come at the same rate. So here's, obviously, AI devices and models are all about the data, particularly the majority of them now being data-based or image-based models. Not all of it is about the data, so you see this is knowledge, a little bit. I'm being sarcastic. And data, as you all know, is not just pixel or voxel intensities, but comes with a lot of connotations that need to be included. Now, here's the claim that I'm going to make to you. This is our world. We are about 8 billion, and if we get every image of every human on Earth, my claim is that we will not have enough. And I do have the receipts here. And let me take you through that. So let's say that to get a device, AI-enabled device or model approved by or cleared by the FDA, you need about 10 to the 4th cases. This is a crude estimate. It's true. Some devices have gone through FDA with maybe a little bit less, but it's a lower limit. 10,000 cases is not much. And I'm talking about training and testing as well, combined. Let's say we have 10,000 devices, which is really a very small number. And let's say we have 100 iterations of the technology. See, you never put out a device, especially computational models and AI devices, and that's it, right? You will have a second iteration and a new technology, and over the course of 5 to 10 years, you'll probably get to 100 different versions of the product. Those have to be tested, again. And let's say post-deployment that you have to monitor the performance. If you are doing this every 6 months, which is perhaps reasonable in some cases, maybe you'll get over the lifetime of the device to 100 instances of post-market monitoring testing. And all of these requires cases. And so if you sum up the exponents, you see that we are already beyond the numbers that we could get our hands on. And so this is one of the reasons that it's inexorably coming, the use of synthetics. And this has been recognized in other areas as well, beyond medicine. Why? In addition, of course, we have unlimited samples. We have exact labels, which we'll never have in patient data. We have diversity by design if you have the models. We can create representative and balanced cohorts. and it's entirely safe for the patient. So these are great strengths of the synthetic data area. So I'm going to do a test. I do have 2 questions. Old style, just raise your hand. One of these mammography images is from a patient. The other one is completely simulated. I'll give you 2 seconds. Tell me which one is the one that's real from a patient. If you think that the patient image is on the right, raise your hand. Okay, bring it down. If you think that the patient image is on the left, raise your hand. Okay. So I was able to fool you. And it's quite easy to fool you because, well, I don't know how many breast imagers there are in the room, but fooling humans is very easy. The models, of course, are much more. Who among us can see which ones of these 2 lesions from these 8 are from a patient? The rest are completely simulated. Raise your hand if you can do that. Okay, so these 2 are from patients. The rest are completely simulated from first principles. So it's really the level of realism has increased significantly in the last 10 years. Here's an example of something that you will never be able to do with a patient. You can grow a cancerous tumor in the breast in silico and track it over the different time points. This type of study will never be able to be done in patients, of course, because of the radiation, in this case using X-ray mammography. On the top row, you see a tumor that has grown considering the surrounding effects of the ligaments. And in the bottom one, you see a tumor that grows in primarily fatty tissue, making it very isotropic. So this type of studies will never be able to do with patients. If I can have the video clicked. We've also done some studies started recently. Can you try again? It worked this morning. So for skin. And skin is an area of interest, especially because now there are some devices that can be on handheld, on cell phones that take an image of a portion of your skin, can tell you risk or can diagnose. Of course, the data sets are available. Those, if anybody has worked on skin, are very small and very not diverse. And so what this allows us to do is to generate, if I can get a click. No, just click on the background of the slide. Thank you. Okay. So this is a combination of Houdini, Python, and Mitsuba 3, which are Houdini and Mitsuba come from the gaming industry and motion picture animation. So this is clearly a very interesting area to work with junior fellows. And you can see also the lesion that I didn't say anything, but we can grow the lesion in the model, of course. And this work will be released in a few weeks. It's a synthetic data set of skin dermoscopy images, including lesions of different sizes. And you can see all the types of things that we can do. We can add hair or remove it. We can change morphology, blood fraction of the different layers, melanosome fractions, add artifacts. And what we'll report at the MICAI conference in Marrakesh in a few weeks is that using this data set, we can improve or compensate for some of the lacking elements of the patient data sets and improve performance or tailor performance for particular subgroups. However, synthetic data is not the panacea. We have challenges, many. One of them is for models that use deep learning techniques, the presence of fakes or hallucinations. I don't have a lot of time, but I want to show you so it's quite visible. So this is, on the bottom row, you see a normal reconstruction of a CT image, and just focus on the left column here, where you see the noisy texture of the CT image, which is what you expect. In the second row, you see a deep learning upsampled or super resolution, claiming that the performance of that reconstruction algorithm is much better. And what I'm pointing here is a structure that appears in that particular patient that is not in the patient. And that's a structure that the deep learning networks have introduced in the model through the reconstruction. It looks very realistic. If you didn't have these, you would say, well, there's something there. We might need to do something with this patient. The key point here is that these hallucinations are present, and it's all about controlling the density of hallucinations or the frequency. And this is one of the efforts that we have, where we've released, this is in a preprint stage, and we'll release a tool in the next few days, I think, on a method that calculates how many hallucinations you would experience in CT reconstruction based on deep learning methods. So this is one, okay. So in the last few minutes, I will talk about, I hope I have kind of hinted at this idea that there's a continuum of computational models that go from the digital twin to the more conventional, stochastic, population-driven studies for medical devices. But the point is here that the models that permeate all of these disciplines are the same. So for instance, it's very likely that when you have to build yourself a model of a digital twin model for, say, breast cancer, you would probably use information from a breast imaging modality. And so those are the type of synergies that we see and have been very influential in the directions of our priorities. So in the future, we will all be doing, and I think this is probably very clear for all here in the audience, that we will be able to sample cohorts from digital models to do all the studies that we need. This has been recognized by the NSF, National Science Foundation, in a tri-agency effort. Don't quote me on this, but I think this is the first tri-agency effort. I've been trying to find other previous tri-agencies, and I haven't found. So this is very, very, very significant. NSF, NIH, and FDA together at the program level put together a solicitation. I think it's still up. Of course, the deadline has passed, but you can look it up and read the requirements. And this is a pilot program. FDT Biotech is Foundations for Digital Twins as Catalyzers of Biomedical Technological Innovation. And it's meant to recognize that the mathematical engineering foundations of synthetic data and digital twins are really connected. And it provides funding for that. Some of the priorities, as you see here, and the ones that are in bold are the ones that FDA has most interest in: transferability, generalizability, robustness, validation, and sharing. Those are the main ones. And one of the program highlights is that, much like our regulatory science tools, the program encourages the development of open source tools for the community. The program is under final review, and the awards will be made public in the next few weeks, I think. Okay, so I have a minute. This is probably the most important slide. Where is it that we think our regulatory science priorities should be in the field of medical digital twins? Number one, evaluation of data-driven models. I do believe that in the near future, we won't have any more procedural models by themselves. There will always be a component that's data-driven or image-based. Because of that, and I know there's a lot of EVUQ people in the audience, I believe that the framework has to be really reconsidered and extended to include data-driven models and guardrails against, for instance, fakes and hallucinations and other things, including bias. Number two, continuous and multimodal data sources. So this is a kind of a new issue for us. We can have models that are fixed, but parameters that are updating so that you can maybe tailor to a patient, or we can have the models themselves evolve with the data. So this, for regulators, creates new questions in terms of the evaluation. Number three, patient-specific versus intended use population descriptions. Most of the devices, all of the devices, most of the devices that FDA deals with are meant for an intended population, right? Devices that are based on digital twin might be for patients, and this is a shift in the regulatory paradigm, especially about how the evaluation is performed post-deployment. Because again, there's the pre-market evaluation and the post-market evaluation. And that has a whole set of new questions that need to be addressed. And the number four, the final, is how are we going to consider variability? Because we have a lot of elements of variability, including patient variability, but also clinical variability, scanner variability, if your method uses any type of image-based models. And how are we going to deal with that? Again, traditionally, if we are talking about a device, it's evaluated against a population of patients, a population of clinicians, a population of image acquisition devices. But in the case of a digital twin, things get narrow. And how to deal with that in the regulatory sense requires new methodologies, I believe. And with that, I think, yeah, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Aldo, for that very interesting presentation from the US Food and Drug and Devices Organization. So will that be FDDA or FDAD?
It's still FDA.
Still FDA. Any questions then for Aldo? Yes, we have microphones here, so I will make sure that that is passed around. Oh, I could have handed it to Martin. So.
Thank you. How do you see, from a regulatory point of view, the synthetic data in context of organ on chip and body on chip? Would you say it's completely a different thing, or would you say, from a regulatory point of view, there are quite some parallels, or if not even maybe synergies between those and the regulation that is needed for those?
Yeah, so I have a background in imaging, and my division is in imaging and diagnostics. Imaging is about 95% of what we do. When I talk about synthetic data, I'm thinking about imaging, image-based synthetic data. I won't be able to comment on organ on a chip, but I think the computational new issues that come about because of the deep learning methods are at the center of our focus right now, because these are new things that we haven't seen and that require new evaluation methodologies. I'm sorry I wouldn't be able to comment if that's also present in some of the other methods that you mentioned, or the other product areas that you mentioned.
Thank you for the question, Marta. Does anybody else have a question? Just behind you, you can just hand the microphone back.
Well, thank you very much. Excellent presentation. In fact, I don't know if you were here yesterday, but I raised the issue of regulatory readiness level in the developmental process. And I would like to know what is the situation now in the United States in terms of early interaction of research and development teams along this pathway, because the evolution is, and the pace of development of these new regulations, is so intense. And, do you have one-to-one interaction with the teams early on?
Thank you for that question. I should have mentioned that before. Yes, we believe that early engagement with us is essential. Not only for you, because we may provide some comments on the direction of what your studies you want to do, but also because we've seen that that pays off for us as well. Because companies that come early to discuss the plans through what we call the Q submission for devices, which is a precursor of the submission, which is also free. And that gets you 1 hour of the entire review team, and interactions and questions is very useful. What we've seen is that these companies, when they come to us, they come with better packages, which means less review time, more success rates. So I encourage everybody to reach out as early as possible. Some cases, it's preferable to already have a product and an indication for use, but we've seen cases where we've addressed pre-meetings where still in the very investigational stages. So we really encourage that.
Thank you for the question. We have time for one more question. I will ask to be handed to this
And
lady here who's
if you don't know, if you don't know who to contact, just email whoever you know, and we'll put you in touch with the right divisions. Sorry.
Thank you. Fantastic presentation. So, as we all know, for any device, one of the key questions that ends up being asked at the end of the day is, do the benefits outweigh the risks? When we look at the regulatory tools that your office is developing, or we talk about in silico medicine, do you have any thoughts on how we eventually start dealing with the risk management aspect of that, including how do we manage the risk within these tools, as software is known to be inherently potentially have defects or have other risks associated with it, for how we define that and incorporate that into our evaluation process for moving to these methodologies?
Yeah, that's a good question that we will need a lot of time to address. The regulatory science tools, I have to say, the fact that you're using them is not guaranteed that you'll still be evaluated. And it's true, when you release things on a 12 to 18 month cycle, there may be areas where maybe there may be problems with the tool, or maybe cases where it's not applicable and so forth. But I don't think there's any doubt that making these tools available to the community is beneficial, because even in instances where the tools are not particularly super validated, whatever that means, the community itself will take them and apply them in different scenarios. So one of the examples I have is a pipeline for breast imaging that has been used many times. And we've seen that in the GitHub that we used, there's all the time there's new applications and validation or not, and there's more development. And that has led to a much more impactful result than the opposite, which is sitting on a tool for years until you get it right. That's a recipe for disaster, I think.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the answer. I know there's probably lots more questions that could be asked, but I'm just looking at the time, and we have 2 more speakers. Aldo, you're going to be here for the day?
Yes.
Yes, so you're welcome for discussions on any topic in relation to...
Anytime, yes.
Yes. Let's give Aldo a very warm round of applause. So thank you for being here. Our next speaker will be Kelly from EMA, and Kelly is making her way to the stage already. Let's give Kelly a round of applause, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kelly. I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you very much for the invitation. And I'm going to talk about the EMA's support to innovation related to pharmaceutical development. So, but first of all, who are we? The European Medicines Agency is part of the European Medicines Regulatory Network, which is composed of more than 50 national regulatory authorities across 27 member states, and the European Commission is also part of our network. And what do? We have several missions. The first one is to facilitate the development and the access to medicine, to evaluate the applications for marketing authorizations, to monitor the safety of medicines across their life cycle, and to provide reliable information on human and veterinary medicines. So several strategies exist around the development of medicinal products, and you have here some examples on the screen. To some extent, they all aim at integrating science and technologies in medicinal products development, to drive collaborative evidence generation, to address emerging health threats and availability of medicines, and to advance patient-centered access to medicinal products. And all these strategies have 5 common goals, which constitute the basis for the ongoing revision of the EU pharmaceutical legislation. And this new pharmaceutical legislation aims to really promote and foster innovation in regulatory science for the benefits of human and animal medicinal products, from their development to the monitoring of these products. So there are several time points when developers, marketing authorization applicants, holders can come and interact with us across the medicine's life cycle. And I would like today to highlight 5 of them: the SME office, the innovation task force, the academia entry point and the qualification of novel methodologies, and scientific advice procedure. So what is the Innovation Task Force, ITF? It's a multidisciplinary platform which allows early and high-level dialogue and orientation on innovative methods, technologies, and medicines. And what can you talk about in these ITF meetings? We can talk about emerging therapies like cells, gene therapies, targeted therapies, nanomedicines, as well as emerging technologies, for example, digital platform technologies and novel manufacturing, and emerging methods, for example, organ-on-chip, new delivery system methods, and clinical trial methodologies. And I've put here on the screen the contact point in order, if you want to come to us, speak about all these topics. And also you have a link at the bottom right of the slide of a template that you have to complete when you want to come to speak to us. We also have a support to academia. This is a framework that has been put in place since 2017, and there are several objectives here, for example, to translate academic research into novel methodologies and medicines, and to ensure that the best scientific expertise and academic research is available to inform regulatory decision-making. And I've put here the link as well, the contact point for the academia to contact us, to come discuss with us. There is also an EMA SME office, which aims to promote innovation and development of new medicines by small and medium enterprises, because we really think that SMEs are an important source of innovation. I've put on the link here the contact point again, and also the link to the webpage where you will find a lot of useful information. When you contact us, we assign a dedicated contact point who will help you in any questions you may have, for example, on questions you have on scientific advice, regulatory and procedural aspects, on orphan drug designation or pediatric requirements, also access to SME incentives and priority medicine eligibility. So on the website, you will find a user guide, step by step, how to interact with us, what we can offer you. We also have recordings of info session, which might be useful. And you can sign up as well to the mailing list in order to receive newsletters and any interesting or important announcements, which might be useful. Qualification of novel methodology. So this is a pathway which really promotes interactions to allow discussions and agreement on the acceptability of a specific use of a method in the research and development of medicines, as well as for the monitoring of medicines. So there are two types of outputs for this procedure. You can have a CHMP opinion. So CHMP stands for Committee for Medicinal Products for Human Use. This is our committee, which is composed of representatives from all member states and which is in charge of evaluating new applications for new medicines. So the opinion will be based on a very detailed dossier which describes the methodology that you want to use. And you have also a second output, which, contrary to the opinion, is confidential. It's called the CHMP advice. And this is based on the assessment of a less mature dossier, which allows applicants to come to us and present a draft method they have developed, and also they can seek guidance as to what they have to do next to reach a good enough or mature enough dossier to come for an opinion. So the ultimate aim for this qualification of novel methodology is really to speed up and optimize drug development. Some examples here on the slides. For example, you can have qualification of biomarkers, which can predict toxicity or enrich patient population. We also have qualification of surrogate clinical endpoints or digital technologies for use, for example, in clinical studies. Patient and caregiver reported outcomes, PROs and PROMs to be used in clinical studies as well. But also patient registries come for qualification in order to see, to assess the suitability of these data sources to collect data that can be used for regulatory purposes. I've put here a screenshot of a letter of support that was issued a few years ago for Mobilize D digital mobility outcomes as monitoring biomarkers, and you have links as well on the slide. And finally, the last path I wanted to highlight to you today is the scientific advice and protocol assistance. So anybody can request at any point in time scientific advice on any scientific questions. So the aim here is really to advise developers on the best way to generate robust evidence. So unlike the qualification, which is more about methodology and tools to be used for regulatory purposes, here we talk about more protocol to generate evidence of clinical studies. So in order to apply for this, you will need to complete a briefing book and also to submit a draft protocol for discussion with the experts. There can be parallel consultation between EMA and health technology assessment bodies, and also parallel scientific advice with FDA. So all these interaction tools, which I've highlighted to you today, are here for you to come early to discuss about your development, the tools you are currently working on that will help regulatory assessment and decision making at the end. So please feel free to come to us because it's better to discuss at an early stage about the suitability of such tool for the development of medicines. So now I'm going to move to the second part of my presentation because I wanted to speak a bit about the vision, our vision towards 2030 on clinical evidence for regulatory decision making. And what we aim to achieve is that evidence generation is planned at an early stage and guided by data, knowledge, and expertise. So the research questions are drive the evidence choice, so it's not the other way around. And we also embrace the different types of data and different types of methods which are out there. So clinical trials remain core, but they are bigger, better, and faster. They remain the gold standard to generate efficacy and safety data on medicines, but they are better. They can be complemented by real-world evidence, which is enabled, and value is established. And the patient voice guides every step of the way. So in order to reach the objectives set by this vision, the European Medicines Agency, together with the heads of Medicines Agency, have launched a big data initiative, and you have here the link on the slide. And we have also established a framework to unlock the value and enable the use of real-world data and facilitate its integration into the regulatory decision-making. And to oversee all the activities in this field, we have established also a big data steering group, the BDSG, which has a work plan published on our website, and which is, as you can see here, all the 11 priority recommendations that are part of this work plan. So obviously we don't have time to discuss about all today, but I wanted to highlight 3 in particular. Darwin EU, the EU network processes, network capabilities to analyze, including the EHDS, as well as the use of artificial intelligence. So who delivers real-world evidence for regulatory purposes in the EU? Obviously, medicines developers who come with their application dossier on new medicines, but also academia who have access to databases across the EU. They can be also part of large consortia. National competent authorities also have access to national data sources, so they can conduct studies at their end. But also more recently, EMA also conducts its own studies because we have in-house access to a few databases across the EU. We also have framework contracts in place with academia, and so we can procure study. And we also run our own studies through the Darwin EU network, which I'm going to say a few words about now. So Darwin EU, it stands for Data Analysis and Real-World Interrogation Network. It's a federated network of data, expertise, and services that supports better decision-making throughout the product lifecycle, because it aims at generating valid and reliable evidence from real-world healthcare databases. So how does it work? Basically, if you look at the little chart here on the right-hand side, you have the EMA on the left side, which has several scientific committees, and I've mentioned one earlier, the CHMP, but we have others. So during the evaluation of medicines, all these committees may have questions. They may require additional data to support their assessment and their decision-making. So what they will do is that they will send us scientific or research questions. We will then centralize all these research questions, and we will send them to the coordination center of Darwin EU, which is the Erasmus Medical Center University in Rotterdam. So all together, we will develop a protocol in order to address the research question. The coordination center will also prepare scripts, which will then be sent to the different data partners. I don't know how to, data partners here. Which are linked to the coordination center across the EU. The data partners will run the script and send aggregated results to the coordination center, which will then do the analysis and create a report and send it back to us for consideration during regulatory assessment. And the idea here is that the data stays local in the different data partners, and we use a common data model, which is the OMOP common data model, to perform the studies in a timely manner, and also this helps to increase consistency in the results coming through the various data partners. And I've put the link as well to the Darwin EU webpage. So in the network, we have access currently to 20 different data partners. The idea here is really to have a very good representation of various geographic, like region across Europe, and different care settings as well. We have databases from primary care, from secondary care. We have biobanks. We have also patient registries. At the moment, we have access to to data from about 130 million patients. But in the next few weeks, I think we will onboard 10 additional data partners, and by next year, we will have 14 total. So we will onboard 10 more. And we will run studies through all these databases. So how do we use this data coming from the real-world data sources? So we see really 3 different areas where we can leverage, or we can really use real-world evidence. The first one is to help us understand the clinical context, and that will help us to contextualize a bit the package which we receive from the pharmaceutical industry. Real-world evidence can help us understand the disease epidemiology, for example, disease prevalence, incidence, progression. We can look at how patients are diagnosed and treated, so to understand the clinical management. And we can also run studies to understand how drugs are utilized, so to look at drug utilization patterns, switching, off-label use, etc. We can also use such data to support the planning and validity of clinical studies, because this can inform the design and feasibility of the studies. They can help us in patient recruitment, for example, or also to look at the representativeness of the clinical trial population compared to the real-world patient population. So we can really see external validity in the clinical study results which we receive. And finally, real-world evidence can help in the investigation of the associations between the exposure to a drug and the events happening in the patient later. So to look at the effectiveness and the safety of the products, and also to look at the long-term impact of the regulatory risk minimization measures which are imposed on the companies. So I'd like to say a few words now about the European health data space, which colleagues have mentioned a few times this morning. So this initiative is really to promote the effective use of health data. There are two main streams, if I can say like that. The first one is to look at how we can use health data prospectively, so through primary data collection. But now I'm mostly going to talk about the reuse of health data, which is also called the health data at EU. And for this, in order to see how we can reuse health data across the EU, an infrastructure has been established, which will allow us to really see how this can facilitate research and innovation on medicines, and also how it can support better policy making. So very, very simple scheme here of this new infrastructure which has been built for the secondary uses of health data. So the idea is really to connect together different data nodes with European regulatory institutions, including EMA, so EMA data, health data access bodies, and data sharing infrastructures, and to see how we can share data together. In order to see how this can work, if this infrastructure is really suitable to reuse health data across the EU, there are 5 use cases which have been launched in order to inform the design, development, and the deployment of health data at EU, or also known as EDITH-CSA. And the second use case, which is about the natural history of coagulopathy-related events in COVID-19 patients, here includes the use of the Darwin EU network, together with other data nodes like Finland, France, Denmark, and Croatia. And all these data sources will come together to see how this infrastructure can be leveraged, whether it's properly built, or whether it needs to be adjusted to address our needs. And finally, just a few words on artificial intelligence. This is a quote from our EMA management board from the end of last year, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to skip. So AI holds really important promises across the medicine's life cycle, and we've heard that already this morning. We see it as a great opportunity to increase efficiency and productivity through the automation of processes, through addressing scalability issues, for example, in manufacturing world or quality control aspects. It can reduce error, it can facilitate access to information, reduce human cognitive loads, so we provide information at the fingertip. AI can also support the transformation of text data into structured data to help our assessment of all the data we get. So it can really support the structure and summarizing of information, and also can expand insights through synthetic control arms, clinical prediction model, confounding adjustment, digital endpoints, and all this. This can really support prediction of probability of events. And obviously, the digital technologies, virtual human twins, can enable the use of AI. And then there is a circle, so AI can also train the new models, etc. So we are back in the circle, like a colleague mentioned this morning. So in view of this very fast evolving world of AI and machine learning tools, the European Medicines Regulatory Network has drafted a reflection paper on the use of AI in the medicinal product life cycle. And here we are actually convinced that AI can really support the acquisition, the translation, the interpretation of the data, but we also need to use a risk-based approach in the use of these tools. And this will depend on the type of AI technology, but also the context of use. So that's why we created this reflection paper, and we expect that medicines developers or any bodies planning to use such tool in the development of medicines will apply a risk-based approach and will come to speak to us very early in order to see whether these technologies are suitable for regulatory purposes. Sorry for this, because I think when we, changed the formatting of the slide, it all, it's not very nice anymore. But I'm not going to go into the detail. I just wanted to highlight that we have also developed an AI work plan to guide the use of AI in medicine regulation in Europe towards 2028. There are 4 main streams, and apologies for this. You can find it on the website. We have a stream about guideline, about tools, about collaboration and change management, and about experimentation. And what I wanted to highlight here is that in the next few years, we have already planned for several AI public workshops in order to interact with our stakeholders on this topic. And the next one is already scheduled on the 5th of November. So the take-home messages, sorry, I see that I'm already running out of time. So looking at this very fast evolving world of innovative medicines, in particular taking into account all these rare conditions and, for example, the development of precision medicine, etc., innovative tools are really essential to provide patients and with best and safe care. So as you can see, I've highlighted several interaction paths which you can use in order to come speak to us at an early stage to discuss about the acceptability, the suitability of the technologies you are developing to support development of medicines. So the earlier the better. And we need really to embrace the wide spectrum of data and methods which are being developed because this will help in developing new, better and safer medicines for patients. So maybe I just stop here. I think this is my last slides, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kelly, for the presentation. We do have time for some questions, though, of course. So does anybody have some questions? We have a question in the front row.
Thank you for a great presentation. I got a question regarding what you showed from the Darwin site. How long does it take for the cycle to run? Because you have multiple components, and if you have something that you're evaluating, you're in a time frame, right? So it needs to run fast, and then you turn them into first, distill them into research questions, you turn them into queries, you send them, you assess the quality, you return it back, you evaluate, and then so how does it take? Yeah. How long does it take today?
That's a very good question. Thank you very much. And now that Darwin has been established over the last 2 years, we are still in a learning curve. So we aim at providing results within a few weeks. Can be coupled to 4 weeks' time. So this will hopefully, depending on the research question, fit into the regulatory assessment. Now what we are putting in place as well is like over-the-shelf type of analysis. So we have already scripts prepared. Data partners are aware about them. They have already integrated the scripts into their system, so we can go much faster. But we have also complex type of studies which will take a bit longer. And I think as we go along, we will learn to go faster and generate better evidence. So yeah, that's a great question. It depends on the research question. And also the type of data partners which can provide the answers to these questions, because it always changes.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. We have time for another question if there is. There is indeed, right here in the middle, and I missed you the first time, the last speaker, so just here, right there, yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. I wanted to ask the same question to Aldo as well. How do you plug in the patient aspect into these evaluations when you consider? What do you expect from the industry concretely to establish that patient aspect is considered? Do you have any requirement, or are you looking forward to something?
So we involve patients in all our activities. Patients are represented in all our scientific committees, so they are really here during the assessment and the decision-making phase. They are also involved in all the initiatives, like the Big Data Steering Group. So they are really a part of all our activities, and we always consult them. We have various groups, like patient organization representatives everywhere. So we always take their input into account, also during commenting phase of public consultation, etc. So this is very key, and it's part of our strategy towards 2030 as well.
Okay, so if we come to you with a modeling and simulation activity, we, as an industry, would be best to look into the patient aspect as well before we come to you.
Definitely, this will be part of our requirements during the assessment.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Just looking at time, I think I'd like to move on to the next speaker. But Kelly, you're going to be here until lunch, is that correct?
Yes.
So you'll be here during the lunch, or you'll leave after lunch?
I might leave before.
Might leave before lunch. The only time, if you want to speak to Kelly, is the coffee break, which, by the way, will be roughly around the same length. It's going to be put back a little bit, just from the timetable. So Kelly, thank you very much. Give Kelly a round of applause, please. And our final speaker in this session then is going to be Nadia from the European Commission. And Nadia is in the second row and making her way to the stage. Please give Nadia a round of applause. And the clicker, if you require it, it's on the podium.
Great. Just setting everything up.
So everything's going to be pushed back by...
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nada Al-Kayet. I work for the European Commission's unit responsible for medical devices. It's my pleasure to be here today, and thank you very much for the invitation. I understand that this is going to be one of the final ecosystem meetings, but I wish that I had been involved earlier in the project. But I am a regulatory nerd. Compliance is my middle name, so I don't know if you actually wanted me involved in an earlier stage. My main areas of work is software and AI in our unit, and basically today I will just walk you through some of those requirements in the EU, as well as the newly introduced requirements through the AI Act. Really, the discussion that I've listened to in the summaries from yesterday, and quite a lot of research, I must admit, since 4 a.m. until 8, until I got to Amsterdam, made me realize that there is a lot of room for collaboration in this area, and probably early interaction with those regulators that will eventually be taking also decisions on to permit digital twins in the scope of, may it be clinical investigations or clinical trials, or if it's for the actual authorization / certification of a medical device software. So the potential is enormous. I recognize that. But of course, there are some challenges that I will try to look at today. So this is just a very brief agenda. If you're familiar with the MDR and the IVDR, they're the regulations overseeing the medical device placement on the market and continuous compliance with those requirements. I will also look briefly into the AI Act at the very end, and then I will try to highlight some of the key documents that have been developed by EU regulators on these matters. You will hear me refer to the MDCG a couple of times. So this is the competent body that has been established by our regulations in 2017. The group consists of basically the lead officers, representatives from each member states responsible for medical devices in their national territory. Of course, now we have a regulation. We've moved from a directive to a regulation, so there's a lot of centralization. This body is responsible for all of those decisions. In addition to that, we have 13 subgroups. Each consists of around 100 representatives. Consisting of experts from academia, from research, from stakeholders, and of course competent authorities. And by stakeholders, I also mean industry and patients. So for really today's discussions, I could point out so many of these groups, but I am biased. I am responsible for the New Technologies Working Group, so I'll present on my work, and for the clinical investigation and evaluation because it's relevant to us today. So what are kind of, in summary, the biggest impact of the new regulations in the field of software? So I tried to summarize it. It's really no surprise that so much attention was provided to medical device software in the revision and, let's say, moving to these regulations. Currently, it's estimated that around 30 to 50% of medical devices on the market either involve software as a primary component or as a key enabling component. So, and we see that number just going up and further exponentially over the next years. These devices can range from diagnostic imaging systems to wearable health monitors and mobile health applications that qualify as medical devices. So in summary, why the new regulation? Well, we had problems on the market that we needed to fix, but also software was primarily self-declared under the directives, so class 1. We moved it now to under a notified body oversight. We have new specific rules for software depending on their risk. It's a risk-based system. Requirements for post-market surveillance and vigilance, so you don't just place your product on the market and forget about it, clearly. There's reinforced requirements detailed in the regulations about what are the appropriate systems and ongoing monitoring in place. Risk management, of course, it's pre-market, but also post-market, and the life cycle approach, which has been very much emphasized, and I'll elaborate on that in the next slide. So this is the very simple kind of depiction of the life cycle approach that has been reinforced through the regulations. So as I mentioned, it's not just it's not safety by design, but also it's continuous monitoring while on the market. There's requirements for post-market surveillance and vigilance, post-market clinical follow-up, meaning that as part of your clinical evidence, you can already indicate what kind of activities you might be conducting in the post-market phase, which is relevant specifically for software and especially AI-enabled devices. This is another way of representing the life cycle approach with all of our wonderful requirements. The quality management system, if you're aware with it, is really the backbone of any manufacturer's system for developing devices, manufacturing devices, which inherently in it has a risk management system that needs to go from the post-market to the pre-market. So with that introduction and kind of like catching up on where we are in the MDR, these are some of the kind of critical guidance I would suggest to all actors working in the software field, medical device software, startups who are considering to enter the field. We're often faced with the unfortunate realization that developers did not know that their product was a medical device until very end of the stages where they realize they have to apply to a notified body and seek certification. So this isn't ideal. We try to communicate as much as we can and do information sessions as much as we can. But of course, if it's a medical device that falls within the definition, and the definition is quite broad, and a claim is made, then it falls under the regulatory framework. So in short, 3 key guidance. There's a 4th one on wearables. So I saw some references in some of the publications regarding the possibility of sensor and wearable technologies. So I haven't added it here, but I'm happy to add it in retrospect if the slides are going to be published. And what we always say is we should start with qualification. So before we even decide to look at the MDR or the AI Act, you need to know if your product qualifies as a medical device. And this is where I would strongly highlight MDCG 2019-11, which is the guidance on qualification and classification of software. Essentially, this guidance embodies a lot of the principles that were agreed upon at IMDRF level. What is IMDRF? The International Medical Device Regulators Forum, where we sit with the US FDA, Health Canada, Australia's TGA, Singapore, Japan, et cetera. I could go on. And we align on our principles on how to regulate medical devices and also software and AI. So this is the EU's definition of a medical device. It has also recently been adopted by the IMDRF, so big kudos to the EU team for convincing everyone around the world to move slightly away from SAMD, where we clearly highlight that the product and the software can be independent. It can drive or influence the use of a device, and it can be working in combination, such as, for example, with an insulin pump. And as I mentioned earlier, we have a very broad definition. It's basically a capture all. It's not nice to describe ourselves in a negative, but it's everything that's not a medicine. So unfortunately, we haven't found a better way to brand ourselves. Hopefully we will. But as you can see here, I've highlighted some of the keywords of the definition that could be of interest to your group. So software intended to diagnose, prevent, monitor, to alleviate, compensate for an injury or a disability, or to investigate, replace, or modify an anatomy or of a physiological or pathological process or state. Of course, we also cover IVDs. They are, as you probably know, they're mostly dealing with specimens, but we also have IVD software. So here's a slide which is intended to kind of reflect the interplay with the AI Act. So the risk classes according to the MDR and IVDR, so the Medical Device Regulation and In Vitro Diagnostic Regulation are on the left-hand side. And essentially what is regulated by the AI Act is on the right-hand side. So medical devices have been identified as a high risk. This does not mean that that automatically up-classifies your product. It doesn't. It just means that you're subject to additional requirements from the AI Act. And essentially, if you're not familiar with our regulatory framework, Class 1 and Class A products are self-declared by the manufacturers by virtue of a declaration of conformity, and everything else is under the purview of our designated notified bodies, which we have currently 50 in the EU for MDR and 12 for IVDR. So this is the risk categorization mechanism, so how you determine the risk associated with your software or device, essentially taken from the International Medical Device Regulators Forum and adopted in the EU. It's really accentuating or adding attention to how you can determine your risk class based on the state of the healthcare situation or the patient condition and the significance of the information provided by the software. So is the software being used directly to diagnose? Take, for example, Trisomy 21 risk calculator, which takes, that's an example that's not really a virtual human twin, but yeah, that takes measurement of the neck fold of the baby through a scan, through a couple of results from a IVD diagnostics, puts it through a calculator, comes out with a probability score on whether or not the child slash fetus might have trisomy 21. So this is the significance of the information. Of course, to treat or to diagnose directly, then you fall into the higher risk classes. On cybersecurity, I might skip a little bit through those slides, or faster, I might say. There's MDCG 2019-16. Of course, all of our products are essentially, a large number of them are connected to healthcare systems. They are susceptible to cybersecurity risks and issues. So this is an essential guidance that just completely maps out for you some of the requirements of the MDR and IVDR on how to ensure that your devices are safe on the market. And with that, there's the entire framework, so safety by design, and also an essential principle taken from the IMDRF, which is joint responsibility, so, or shared responsibility in the sense of responsibility across the supply chain. It's another way of representing that, a more aesthetically pleasing slide. Then clinical evaluation, so really to get into the deep of how to be in compliance other than putting together your technical documentation for your notified body. This guidance intends to walk you through the principles of how to put together clinical evidence, and it corresponds to quite a number of provisions in the MDR and IVDR. So as you see here, for the MDR, it would be a clinical evaluation. For the IVDR, it would be a performance evaluation. And recognizing that there are different software, so if you're working in combination administering a medicinal product, of course you need to test your product in a clinical investigation or provide your clinical evidence in combination with that medicinal product. But if your software is considered independent, then you could be able to do retrospective studies. So there could be exemptions in terms of making use of existing data, either through registries, et cetera, in order to prove that you're in compliance. And if your software is driving or influencing the use of a medical device with a medical purpose, like a surgical robot, et cetera, then that would be considered, of course, that you need to do it in combination with some independent modules that need to be studied. This is the information flow of how to go through the MDR's complicated clinical evidence framework. Essentially, you need to establish your technical performance, analytical performance, or establish your valid clinical association and scientific validity for your device, for your software, in the sense of proving that there is a clear association between what the software's output is and the disease that it's intended to treat or to diagnose. So with that, you also need to develop a framework for proving your clinical performance. So it's not just about establishing that there's a scientific validity. You would have to go into the framework of actually testing through the form of retrospective or prospective studies and the wonderful documentation requirements. So I've gone through this, and now I will flip to additional requirements from the AI Act. And here, I guess the first principle is to understand is that the AI Act is intended to be a horizontal legislation, which was actually published in the official journal 4 days ago. So the time is ticking, especially for the prohibited uses that have been mandated now in the EU. What it aims to do is integrate all vertical frameworks. So now the MDR is considered a vertical framework. And what you would follow is go to your notified body designated under the MDR and IVDR in order to undergo the additional requirements that are mandated by the AI Act. A key point to keep in mind is that there's no retrospective application, so you would go, if you have an AI-enabled product now, you don't need to immediately run to a notified body, even though it's advisable to go well in advance, because you would only have to go in when it's entered into application, but also if there's a significant change. So these are some of the main operational elements that are introduced by the AI Act, some of them which are very familiar to our field. So the risk management already exists under MDR. Governance and quality of data sets, it wasn't explicit under our regulations, but essentially even if you're manufacturing a traditional medical device, you would hope to have quality data sets that you're utilizing in order to ensure conformity and performance. Transparency and information, there are principles for transparency and information to users and healthcare professionals and patients under the MDR, but really now they've been elaborated from an AI-enabled device perspective. And accuracy, robustness, cybersecurity, quality management system, essentially already requirements under the MDR. So you see there's a lot of overlap, and that's why they're not additional requirements in many cases. So to summarize all of those other requirements, which ones are actually in addition? The use of high quality training, validation and testing data sets, the new data governance procedures, transparency and the information to users on how they may deploy the system, such as healthcare institutions, and the human oversight, of course, requirements. I'll skip through that one. So this is where we are when it comes to the AI Act. As I mentioned, it was published in the official journal on the 12th of July. So this means that there is now time ticking for 6 months from now, where member states will start to phase out the prohibited systems. The new requirements for general purpose AI will commence to apply in 12 months' time. The requirements for high risk will start to apply. So for the MDR and IVDR, it's between 24 and 36 months. And then all of the other rules of the AI Act will start to apply to other products falling outside of the MDR and IVDR. So with that, I would like to conclude. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Nada, for the presentation. We do have some time for questions. There is one at the front, and then I'll take this gentleman then after that. So we'll go front first of all.
Hi, thank you. I got a question regarding how things are actually being presented here in terms of the fact that you have notified bodies with 50. That's basically what's increasing over the last year or so, I think, to actually match these changes that are actually coming into place. How can we ensure the communication and the compliance of these notified bodies with the regulations that are there, for example, MDR, so they interpret them and evaluate them the same way? So is there another, who is going to evaluate the evaluators? Maybe the question.
Yeah. So certainly, very good question. So if for those possibly not familiar with the regulatory framework, for medical devices and IVDs, what we have in the system is a delegation of power, let's say, to, they're not authorities, they're private organizations which are designated by national competent authorities. So the competent authority in Germany, the competent authority in France, responsible for medical devices, goes on site, conducts an on-site assessment with different authorities across the EU, so it's a joint assessment. It's a 2.5-year process now in order to actually become designated because of the new requirements also for notified bodies. And essentially through the regulation and the impact assessment that we did at the time for the directives, what was recognized as one of the main issues is the divergence sometimes in the application of the requirements. This made sense somewhat when we were working under directives because the member states could implement and transpose the directives differently in national law, but now we have one body of legislation. So that's already a step up. Second of all, we're a sector that is heavily reliant on standardization, especially international standards. So standards are a way for presumption of conformity with the EU requirements, And essentially, those are, when manufacturers are using them, then the notified body that's certifying them is essentially following the lines of the standard. There is a new governance mechanism, which is the Notified Body Coordination Group, which is mandated now by the MDR. So it is a requirement for notified bodies to coordinate within that group, to develop consensus documents, and to drive technical progress and within all of the notified bodies. So this is the first time that we really put in place not only a collaboration mechanism between notified bodies, but also mandate them to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. We have time for one more question. This gentleman here had a question just on this, aisle here, yes.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. A lot of what you presented appears to have a long tail with things that go on far in the future. How does this mesh up with projects that typically end after 3 years? The digital twins are developed in 3-4 year projects, while the regulatory stuff is 8 years, 10 years in the future. How does that mesh?
Sorry, I don't know if I fully understood the question.
I understand there is a long tail of regulatory things you have to do, post-market research and checks. Yeah. Okay, my project ends in a year. My digital twin, do I have to do that post-market research in my free time, or is there some other way how to do this?
Well, it depends if you're claiming a medical purpose. So in a sense here, if there's a clear purpose that is falling within the definition of a medical device, the product couldn't be placed on the market or used on patients or used in hospitals, unless, for example, it was an in-house developed device where the hospital institution takes full responsibility for that device, which I don't think that is easy to achieve. In addition, there are very specific requirements for in-house devices. The matching the regulatory requirements with the development timelines, I think all we can say is that you get in touch with the bodies early in the development phase. There's also now the possibility to do the consultation with our expert panels, which are currently hosted by the European Medicines Agency. So to get early clinical advice on how to do your clinical development strategy for high-risk medical devices. And this is voluntary. You can come in, get advice from the expert panels, and see the certification pathway. Also under the AI Act, if it's AI enabled, there's now the mandate to put in place regulatory sandboxes so that you can also develop your device within those sandboxes already, so that you get, let's say, a simpler access to market eventually. And this is a reflection currently ongoing in the EU on whether we need to create regulatory sandboxes for not only AI-enabled medical devices, so other types of innovative devices and software. So it is reflections, but I'm not the one drafting the laws and counting how many years it takes for them to be in compliance. Usually it takes between 2 to 3 years to generate your clinical evidence for innovative devices and to come to market.
Thank you for the question, Nada. Thank you for your answer. Let's give Nada a round of applause once more.